The term itself, career ladder, gives the perception that you have to go against rung by rung and there is a set way of doing it.
There is a perception that an apprenticeship is either for a young person or, again, that you'd be starting again.
It's about that supportiveness and being able to say, we're going to develop you into the best practitioner along the way.
We're going to need really skilled endpoint assessors, people who know what they're talking about in the workplace and have that operational capability.
Keep learning, keep moving forward, reflect how far you've come and where you want to go and how you can get there.
Hi, and welcome to Podcash, the portable CPD and best practice podcast from Cash. My name's Dawn and I'm the editor of Cash Alumni, the fastest growing network of current and future professionals in care, health and education. You can join us for free at cashalumni.org.uk and get access to articles from subject specialists and experts, e-learning to a discount and benefits scheme, and lots of support with career development and your future growth.
I'm Fay Gibbin and I've worked for many years in the early years sector, probably over 20 years now. My passion has always been children and I started my career really early on as an apprentice in a single nursery. I absolutely loved working in that nursery, working with the parents, and progressed quite quickly into a nursery manager of a small chain of nurseries, and recognised really early on that I'd also got a passion in teaching practitioners how to deliver exceptional childcare, and so trained as an assessor within that nursery as an IQA, and then slowly moved across into teaching and learning for the biggest childcare provider in the UK, which is where I spent a lot of my career until most recently. Decided then it was time for a change and worked with awarding organisations on developing qualifications, writing materials, but also chairing and co-chairing the Level 2 and Level 3 Apprenticeship Standard.
That's all really exciting, and I think especially to me as a careers advisor who often tries to explain to people that careers aren't linear anymore. You don't start off in a career and then just climb the ladder in that thing anymore. You can go over here and you can do a bit of that, and you might decide that that's actually what you want to do, and that you might want to do that as more of your time. Do you think there is still a perception that you have to pick what you want to do?
I think there's that perception in every job, that you have to go linearly through your career, that there is a career. I mean, the term itself, career ladder, gives the perception that you have to go against rung by rung and there is a set way of doing it. But one thing that we've really built into our apprenticeship programme, when I headed up the apprenticeship programme, is that it doesn't work like that, that there are opportunities and there are practitioners that still like to work hands-on with the children. Not everybody aspires to that next step, to be that room leader or to be that nursery manager, but actually they want to develop those skills, those knowledge that they've got, and be an expert in a particular area, which is why we always ask them up front what they wanted to do, to make sure that our apprenticeship programme really, really did meet those needs. And it might be that they wanted to be a Senko, and that's the area that they wanted to be. They didn't necessarily want to go down management. They wanted to be a specialist on behaviour management. And it's about finding out from those practitioners what is it they want to be, and move away from this. The only way that you can progress is to progress within up through management. But I also think I'm also a real advocate of practitioners using their skills and moving around the sector. Those skills are so needed in other parts of the sector and really transferable. And again, training providers, that's what they need to be concentrating on when they do train their practitioners, is how can you develop those softer skills that can be working in the community, working with children in the community, or those practitioners that want to go to work as hospital play coordinators. And also one of the other areas that practitioners quite often want to move into is schools. There is always a perception of a school is going to be different. It's going to be 9 till 3. We know that's the perception. We know that's not the reality, but that's what they've got into their head as a teaching assistant. And it's about developing those skills so they can move around that sector more fluidly.
Yeah, and I think there's probably quite a few people listening who have sort of just started to picture different places that they might want to work in when you're talking about being able to move their skills around the sector and try that in different areas. I think that quite often there's the idea that you have to start again if you're going to move into a different area. So, you entered into, for example, early years as a level 2 practitioner, and you started, your career there, or as you did as an apprentice. And there's that idea that if you then moved into a school or moved into like a hospital setting, that you have to go back to wherever it is that you started off, and that's not true. That those transferable skills really do transfer into all of those different places to sort of let you go in sort of sideways.
And I think that's one thing that the new apprenticeship standards are different to the old framework, in they have got those behaviours built into the apprenticeship standard that are fairly common across the care sector in general, really. And so training providers now are developing those behaviours that are needed to be able to move across the sector, because they're much more obvious within the curriculums that have been put together.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's one of the reasons that with Cash Alumni we decided to make the Cash Alumni service for everyone in care, health and education, particularly early years education, because all of those sort of career bits, they're all care and roles that all have very similar sort of behaviours, that idea that those sectors generally will recruit on that sort of values-based recruitment model, and a lot of it is about being able to prove who you are as well as what you do, and a lot of that is very intertwined, so to be able to give people a picture of all the different areas of the sector and where the similarities might be between those things is really helpful.
And I think at schools they don't get the careers advice with all the cuts that are in schools. They don't necessarily always get the career advice that they need. And I always say to my daughter, you don't know what you want to be because you don't know what you want to be because you don't know what you can be. And it's about exposing them to what they can be. And unless they've got family, friends, or they know somebody, they're not sure what else is out there. So it's really encouraging now that training providers do look at careers advice as well, and expose them to things that are out there that they can aspire to be and move into.
Totally agree. Like, I think that there's also a lot of stuff that doesn't exist yet. That there are so many. If you think about the careers that exist now, like there's they weren't around when I was at school. I couldn't have decided that I wanted to be a specialist in child neuroscience, that wasn't a thing, but we've got, as the world evolves and it happening on a much faster bit now, there are new jobs all of the time because we understand more about the world and about people every day. So I think we need to prepare people for being able to decide what they want to do and to make it happen. We'll look at practitioners like Minnie Young-Vaya and, practitioners like Linda Baston-Pitt who've gone on to, and yourself, to just go, actually, this is what I want to do. There's not necessarily a line that takes us there, but if I go like this and then this and I take this bit here, then I can make that a thing. That can be what my job is, and sort of, shaping the future as we'll want it to be.
I mean, it's evolved so much since I joined the sector. Over the years, things have changed. We didn't have specialist roles. We didn't have the recognition within the sector. Didn't have the recognition, and the parents used to drop the children off. And it's that traditional. We think you're a babysitting service. So that was only 20 years ago. That wasn't that long ago. And we've come so far to really professionalise the sector. And that sector also includes nannies, because I know that's the last time that we met. We met at the Nursery World Show, and the nanny hub there was the start for nannies to be able to be recognised as part of the sector, not the lost sector. And also their campaign that they've got, Regulation Matters, where nannies need to be seen to be regulated, because at the moment it's quite concerning and quite worrying that they're not.
I was really shocked when I found out, because it was a couple of years ago I went to the Great British Nanny Conference, and one of the nannies who was exhibiting there with the International Nanny Association was talking me through nannying as a career. And I mean, the idea that me, with my knowledge of childcare, having never worked with children or done anything with children, but having read articles on cash alumni, that's that I could probably pass the Ofsted test and register with Ofsted in like 20 minutes and be like, oh, I'm an Ofsted registered nanny, not, just, and you don't need to be Ofsted registered. You could just put an advert on Gumtree saying, I'm a nanny now. And that I found that really sort of shocking, in that there are so many really well qualified childcare professionals who can do, and at the moment childcare professionals at an entry level, still aren't particularly well paid. It's not, a well recognised job financially. There's so many passionate and well qualified childcare professionals who, I think, if they knew a little bit more about nannying, and actually that nannying isn't necessarily going to live with a posh family full time and doing their washing and all of the other stuff as well, that it's actually a really, nice job for the right sort of person.
I think nannying is where the early years sector, like full daycare and regulated part of the sector, was probably about 10 years ago, where there was that lack of recognition, there was that lack of career recognition, there was a lack of respect for the qualifications that they hold. But I also think, having spoken to the nannies on that day in the nanny hub, they don't see themselves as the sector, as part of the sector either, which is a shame. It's sad to hear, and it's about encouraging them as well to get confidence in where they do sit. And that's probably because it's not mandatory for them to have a qualification or a recognised qualification. They don't have to be regulated by Ofsted, as you've just said. So they don't see their place and they don't see where they sit. And being part of the Regulation Matters campaign, that's one of the things that we're looking at, is looking at putting a framework together for their training to say that they have been trained in these areas, or they have got these qualifications, or they do follow these codes of conduct that we're putting in place. So it's exciting times for the nanny sector.
Do you think part of that's about educating parents as well on how to sort of look for a nanny? It isn't that there's lots of things I think that we need to consider on that side of things as well, because talking to nannies in the sort of interviews that I've done with nannies and speaking to nannies at events and stuff, like, I think one of the things that's quite scary for nannies and thinking about all of the sort of paperwork stuff is that parents don't often know what their responsibilities are for taking on a nanny, in that it might be that they don't know about sort of doing the checks that you've got to do, the right to work checks, or sort of how to register to be an employer and pay tax and national insurance, or any of that sort of stuff. And I think that when nannies are starting out, it can be quite daunting, the prospect of sort of shopping for a family.
I don't think that they realise up front that they're the employer. I think that becomes a bit of a shock to them. Having spoken to Tricia at Bappen and other people in Bappen, it sounds like it's quite a shock to the nannies, to the parents, that they are the employer. They think that they put an advert out, they get a nanny, like you said, the typical Mary Poppins. Look, we put our advert out and we get this ideal person, but they are the employer, and they're in a risky situation because they're on their own in the house with the children on their own. So it is about making sure and educating that they have got those right to work checks, and also the nannying agencies that are placing them as well, because I can see that there are varying levels of quality of checks, advice and guidance that are given by each nanny agency. So it's about standardising and putting some code of conduct and framework around governing really the nannying agencies as well.
Yeah, and I think that there are some sort of ways that people can filter a little bit in terms of checking that a nanny agency is registered with one of those professional bodies like the Association of Nanny Agencies, or or the nannies that they're using registered with Bappen or with any of where they are getting a little bit of support with that professional side of their business, because I suppose nannies are their own business. They're there to provide that service and to sell themselves to those families for them to then be employed. But in terms of their development and all of that stuff. I think that there is a little bit more freedom almost as a nanny to develop in a particular way. You know, we're seeing nannies that follow different route ways. I mean, how do you think people can decide, you know, how can they figure out which bits of the sector that they want to work in and try?
I think it's a great start to spend time with children of all ages. And I know as part of the qualifications you should really, as good practice, be spending time with children 0 to 5, but that doesn't always happen. And it really is important that we do go through all those ages, because it might be that you find out that you like a particular age more than working with another age. But the only way you're going to know that is by trying it. And also, I think having the confidence and the conviction to go out and try different ways and different places. Sometimes it's, I'm an early years practitioner and the only place that I can work is full daycare, or the only way I can work is as a childminder. But actually looking further afield, and it is a confidence thing within the sector, because like you say, it's low paid, it attracts, naturally attracts people that follow for that low pay, that don't have the confidence to be able to say my worth is more and I can go out into other parts of the sector. That they kind of stay with what they know. And I think it is about going out and just trying, just giving it a go and trying it, because it might be something that you really, really enjoy.
I think I see that a little bit when I'm talking to people who want to do more and who are looking at maybe that sort of room leader or supervisor or sort of manager level job and going, oh, but I couldn't do that. But if I ask them to tell us all of the reasons that they dislike the room leader they work under now or the manager that they work for now, they can give us some really good constructive feedback on what that person could do better. And actually being able to recognise that that's the same thing, and that being able to recognise sort of what that professional job would look like, and actually that you can sort of draw those criticisms and help to build something better, is that you are capable of being able to do that if you can have those sort of constructive ideas. So I think if people come into contact with services in their own lives, you know, like with their own children or in those other situations, and they can review their experience and know sort of like from a professional standpoint what could maybe have been better or what was done really well, that might be a nice indication that actually you are ready to start exploring doing something like that, because you can objectively and critically look at it, and that is that sort of academic benchmark. You know, we do literature reviews in degrees and master's studies and things, because that ability to look at something through that lens is a marker as to your ability to maybe explore it further.
I think the Apprenticeship Standard is helping that, in that the endpoint assessment is all of a sudden being able to talk to people at the end that you don't know, and they've never had to do that really. It's them showcasing their knowledge and their understanding in what they've learned along the way. And when I've seen people come out of their endpoint assessments, the ones that I thought were really going to shy away and not sell themselves and not sell the knowledge and the understanding that and practical skills that they've demonstrated and built along the way, you've put them in that situation and they've come back out and they've gone, wow, I didn't believe that I would be able to talk about what I've talked about. And I was so excited to share my portfolio of what I've achieved. And I think that's going to play a part, because all of a sudden there's an external recognition that's never been there before in such a formal way, for them to be able to demonstrate and show that.
The other part of that is that, talking about your learning journey and how you developed, that we're going to need really skilled endpoint assessors, you know, people who know what they're talking about in the workplace and have that operational capability, but who can also recognise the reception of that, you know, like when someone's talking about how they've done it, you know, to be able to reflect that and to make people feel good about being able to talk about their achievements. So those people like yourself, whose passion is sort of moulding and shaping and helping other people to see their worth, there's a place for them in this sort of new future of being able to assess that stuff, because that warm person who'll be able to sort of let people know that, yeah, this is good, Sharon, keep telling us the nice things, and to bring that out of people, that's going to be really important.
I think that goes back to what you were saying earlier, wasn't it, about what jobs weren't around? And being an endpoint assessor is so different. The skills are very, very different to being an on-programme assessor. And I think, you've got to get their competency out in a short amount of time in a set way, whereas an on-programme assessor will look at that very differently. And if they're not competent, they go back, they revisit it, they go through different learning and make sure they've got the mentoring, the support that they need. But with an endpoint assessor, really, it's that snapshot in time to prove the competency, and the skills are very, very different. So yeah, that is a job that's appeared that and created that was never there.
SkillsMiner is a great new addition to the Cash Alumni website. We've worked with SkillsMiner to offer access to their amazing tool that can help you to figure out what you might want to do next in terms of learning, or which job you might be suitable for that you might not have considered before, or even just to figure out what your skill set is. You can access SkillsMiner for free as part of your Cash Alumni membership. All you've got to do is go to cashalumni.org.uk and head to the SkillsMiner page in the professional development section. We keep talking about apprenticeships, and I think that as much as we have talked about this in previous episodes, that it's always worth talking about a little bit more, that there is very much still a perception that an apprenticeship is either for a young person, or again that you'd be starting again, that you do an apprenticeship at the bottom level of something. But that's really changed as well, hasn't it? You can do an apprenticeship at master's level, at that level 7, at that sort of really, an apprenticeship is just one more of the ways that you can learn whilst you're working.
Absolutely. And you're right, apprenticeships, even the perception of them by parents, by schools, has always been, you start at a level 2, you work your way up. It's for the students that don't want to go and do their A-levels. But it's all very different now. And I think that's been really helped by the apprenticeship standards coming in and removal of the framework. So with the apprenticeship standards, we now see a lot more level 5s and 6s. Because the apprenticeship standard is linked to a job role, whereas previously it wasn't, it was linked to a qualification. So by linking them to job roles, it means that employers have chosen what job roles are available in their sector, but they've also then spent the time as a working group and in consultation with the sector to define what those skills look like, what those behaviours and what those knowledges look like within that job. So that's naturally opened up the levels, and because it's opened up the levels, it's meant that the funding around the apprenticeship is now available for the higher levels where it hasn't been before. So that was a real big turning point and landscape change for the apprenticeships when the frameworks came out, the apprenticeship standards came out. So yeah, that was a real needed, and particularly in the early years, because the level 2 and 3 has been developed. And is live and is out there. But the level 4, 5 and 6 are currently being looked at and being developed. They aren't concentrating necessarily on all of the management of the running of a nursery or the management of running of any daycare setting or childcare setting. They're looking at developing the practice as part of those levels. So again, it goes back to, let's not have that linear career ladder of going straight into management. The apprenticeship standards looking at more in-depth curriculum and childcare.
A lot of people get a little bit scared of going back into education. We've already talked a little bit about how, there are people within care and education who might feel like they ended up there as a sort of second option or because they couldn't. And I don't necessarily think that that's true. I think that they ended up there mostly because they're amazing, and that in most instances is probably the right place for them to be in terms of who they are. But that development and going back into education is scary because they've always been told they can't, which is why they might feel that way, because of the way maybe that that academic side of education is still held in sort of a higher esteem than the vocational side. And like you were talking about apprenticeships being for kids who didn't want to do A-levels, but what's wrong with not wanting to do A-levels? You know, what I don't understand why we still hold things in that sort of less good than. But in terms of then going back into education, that can make it quite scary, you know, because we still think of it as being that classroom where people are going to look down on us or tell us that we've got it wrong. Or what is there, you know, what can people do to ease themselves back in, or to maybe just show themselves that it's not as scary as they might think it is?
I think it's the skillfulness of the training provider in being able to draw out the apprentices, demonstrating how they do their job, their knowledge and skills, making sure that they do that in a real nice, subtle, supportive way. It isn't about going in and saying, right, today I'm going to, and go with a checklist, because that's quite frightening. Anybody that's observed, anybody that is in that situation is going to find that frightening, no matter how many times you get observed. It's about that supportiveness and being able to say, we're going to develop you into the best practitioner along the way. And to do that, you are going to have feedback from me. It'll be very constructive. It'll help you build on your skills. It'll increase your confidence. But we're going to relate it to what you do as a job. We're not going to put you into a situation that you're unfamiliar with, because we'll have made sure that we work with your mentor before that point to make sure that they've spent time with you. You've observed people carrying out that role. You've sat with them, and so you actually understand why that activity, that task has been done that way. And before the assessor then even comes out to assess, they will have gone through that process of making sure that they are ready. And I think the 20% off the job training has always been there. But it wasn't until it started to be monitored and regulated that it became a little bit of a stumbling block. It's always been written into the qualifications, it's always been written into the apprenticeship frameworks. I think that the last 12 months and the way that apprenticeships have had to be changed in the delivery model, I think has been really good with the 20% off the job, in that it's made people recognise that it's not about getting them out of the setting and doing face-to-face. It is okay to do like teleconferencing of some description, a webinar, short, but also to look at the coaching and mentoring that they have on site, because they will have it all the time. They'll be sitting with their seniors or their manager all the time being coached and developed, and that all adds up to it. So it isn't about this scary classroom situation where you're going to be talked and spoken at. It is about a cohesive approach of looking at it from coaching, mentoring on site as well.
And if people aren't ready to sort of show their cards to another human being and say, I'm ready to do some development, or I wouldn't mind, you know, looking at this job up here, but it might mean I need to do an apprenticeship, or look at how we can do that, and they're not ready to have those like conversations where they tell people they're ready to do things because they're not entirely sure that they are. Do you think that doing something like some e-learning, or sort of a bit of sort of secret development or stuff that they can do sort of in their own time, and that is flexible, and that they can put up, you know, leave for a couple of weeks and come back to, do you think that is a way that people can sort of prove to themselves that they are capable of the wordy stuff? Yeah,
I think so. And you do get people with those kinds of personalities, don't you, that go into a new situation and expect to be able to do something straight away, whether that is at work or not. It's in your personal life as well, isn't it? You always get that one where they'll read and they'll go online and they'll, like I said, they'll do e-learning, or they'll do absolutely anything before they walk through that door because they don't want to be seen as not knowing
that's me.
it.
I'm a terrible collaborator. Like I don't like working with people on things like directly. Like I'll do my bit and I'll contribute, but I'm really terrible at sort of that like group work bit, because I want to figure it all out before I share, and that doesn't work. If you're working together on a thing, you've got to share before it's ready. That's how it gets ready. So yeah, that's I suppose that's from my perspective. It's that it might be scary to say, oh, actually, I'd really like to do that, before you know that for a fact that you're definitely okay to do that.
I think there's lots of things out there, lots of ways of being able to do that now. And if that's what makes them more comfortable or gives them more confidence to be able to move forward, absolutely. But I think again that's about educating training providers or managers to think that that's a way of being able to encourage them to be able to take that next step. I know when I've worked in training providers, we've seen people that are in the setting and that the assessors have gone up and said, that is absolutely fantastic what you've done. What level are you? And they'll say, I'm maybe a level 3 or a level 2. And it's like, do you know what? That was so good. Have you ever considered doing the next level? And sometimes it just takes that other person that's outside of the setting to be able to say, wow, that was just fantastic, and give them that encouragement. Something different, something that they don't see.
I think you're right. I think that's part of what I want to say the problem in terms of like the sector in general, and the way that we'll look at ourselves or the way that people look at their abilities, is that because a lot of the way that it works in care or in early years education becomes second nature, and it sort of just becomes embedded in your practice that you do certain things or you react in a certain way, and it has to become second nature because co-regulation is such a huge part of that. So being able to recognise your own state of mind and reflect that and communicate in a certain way and have people, you forget that not everybody does that. Do you think that is reflective of your experience in early years, that it's that ability to be able to tell people what you've done as part of that reflective practice that is sometimes the hardest bit?
Absolutely, and I think that's going back to the endpoint assessment. It's about them showcasing themselves in that endpoint assessment and being able to say, I have done fantastic work. I can show you the planning that I've carried out. And yeah, we're just not naturally, as a sector, we don't shout about ourselves. We don't shout about the skills that we've got. We just carry on caring every single day, and we're not in a shouty sector. And that doesn't help us sometimes. It doesn't help us progress. It doesn't help us look at the wider opportunities, because there are lots of opportunities. And it would be nice to see hubs in regional areas that shared good practice. We're very much a sector of, this is what we do in our nursery, or this is what we do in our setting, and we're not sharing that with anybody.
On that note, if anybody would like to send examples of their best practice or things that they're doing well to alumni@cash.org.uk, I'd love to talk to you about how we share those through Cash Alumni, because I think you're right, Faye, in that we do have to do more shouting about the things that we do really well, and not just to the parents that are the children are coming to nursery, but maybe even just taking photographs of those displays for parents, or the newsletter that you're sending to parents. Send it to me as well, and I'll try and share them sort of on the internet and with that audience of sort of wider practitioners to be able to do a little bit more of that. Because you're right, not only is it about helping other people to recognise the value of early years, but being able to recognise what good practice looks like within early years, not because there's not loads of good practice, but because it helps people to see their own good practice for what it is, and not just because that's what they do.
And I think that happens more in the training side, the education side. So there are websites and companies where they've got shared practice, good practice, things that have been seen in inspection that are really good practice, but it just isn't out there in the early years.
You obviously work in a role where you sort of work for a learning organisation, work helping to train people or helping people to train people to do that sort of stuff. Do you miss the sort of hands-on bit of working in the sector?
Absolutely, but I keep my occupational competency up, so I love to go back in and work with the children. I absolutely love it, and I think you can't keep up with the changes in the sector without doing that. You have to live and breathe it. You're not going to know the challenges that those practitioners have on a daily basis and support them and help them if you're not in the middle. You think you do. You think you've got an idea. You can look at it from the outside, but actually, unless you're working in that sector day in, day out, you don't appreciate the challenges and the good. There is absolutely fantastic practice out there. Absolutely, I do.
Great. I mean, I think that's one of the things that people worry about when they look at development, isn't it? That, oh, well, I'm going to go off in this direction and I'll never get to do any of this fun stuff ever again, or any of this stuff that I really enjoy down here. But you're right, it is a huge part of that development to keep your practice up to date so that you are in the right place to tell other people how it works.
And you've got the credibility as well that you can say to them, we know what you're going through because we've spent time in the sector and in the sector.
And I think the other message there though is that it's not, people see this idea of that you learn upwards, so like the level 2s learn from people at level 3 or 4, and people at level 4 learn from people who are level 5 and 6, but you go back into settings with all of the learning that you've done and all of that sort of qualification base that you've got, and the fact that you train other people, you go back into settings to learn from those people at level 2 and 3 about how it is right now and what's changed since you did your level 2 and level 3.
Children don't learn like that. Children learn, if you think of, I've done my dissertation when I've done my degree on the benefits of siblings, learning from each other, and how children learn from older children, from younger children. It's not about being with everybody that is at the same level, the same age as you. It's an experiences. It's about mixing up your classrooms, mixing up your groups when you're doing teaching, so the conversations happen from experience and position from different places.
Yeah, and I'm loath to admit this as the smart older sister, but my younger sister has taught me so much as an adult that I never expected to learn from her, because mine and my sister's life experiences since we lived together have been completely different. She's got 2 children for a start, and I'm not doing that. So like our experiences have been completely different, and actually learning just from that different life experience from someone that I trust, to understand really what the different hurdles are that people face, and actually sort of the richness of the differences. So even in terms of like colleagues and friends, like we might come at issues from a different direction or have differences of opinions on something, and for me it's really fascinating to understand how they see it that way, and to be able to learn a little bit more about actually the topic that I thought I had a really firm understanding of and a really firm viewpoint on, to now think about how they came to their opinion and use that information. I might now feel differently about it, and I never expected to.
I've seen it in practice. I went over to the Netherlands and spent some time in nurseries over there, and they do horizontal learning. So they deliberately mix the children's classes. So you have babies in a room with children up to 4, and they're all mixed up, and it was fascinating. It's absolutely fantastic to watch. The learning that took place was out of this world, and it was all so natural. It wasn't forced, and they don't go to school till they're 7, so the children have that experience right up till the age of 7 of learning from children of all different ages.
I suppose that there are parallels there when we're talking about nannying, that there's a lot of obviously mixed age households that have nannies who have to have those amazing skills at developing both of those children and planning activities that satisfy both of those children. And I think there's a lot of parents learning now the value of being able to adapt things, and actually how difficult it is to plan learning activities that do all of the things that children need, whilst being able to still be engaging and fun and the patience and everything else that's required. Do you think that both the understanding is increasing through sort of the current situation that we all find ourselves in, but that maybe attitudes might change towards like childcare, towards that idea that that it's much more than that, and it's not just childcare, it is child development and teaching at sort of all of the levels. Do you think we are going to see a change?
I think so. I think that the parents will have more of an understanding Because parents of young children, they're busy. If they're dropping them off at a setting, it's normally because they're going to work, so they don't have time to appreciate it. They would just see the setting as a convenient way for their children to be kept safe during that day. And I think there will be a lot more appreciation because the world has slowed down a little bit. They've been thrown into homeschooling and looking after their children during the day whilst trying to do the homeschooling and education. So I do think there'll be a real difference. I think when the Duchess of Cambridge released the Building Foundations for Life project that she's working on, one of the things that came out from that was that parents didn't always appreciate the role that early years played in the children's development, and the fact that their brain's development is the most rapid in 0 to 2. I think that will also help. It came at an absolute great time. I know it wasn't planned and scheduled to coincide with COVID, but I think it really will reinforce that importance of the early years from a parent's point of view.
There is obviously a lot of stuff around like sort of the children's brain development and the speed that happens in those early years. Do you think people understand the physical development that's guided by early years practitioners in terms of supporting the development through even the way that children sit and move and sort of hold their weight to help them with that sort of stability and being able to develop muscles and hold all the different types of play to help to develop the motor skills in their hands to be able to hold a pen or a pencil? Because I don't think I'd ever thought about that at all until I started reading all of the articles on things like loose parts play and Play-Doh and it not just being about brains and creativity and like being able to think about shapes and structures, but actually about those physical motor development skills that are so important for just humaning in general.
I think it's much more preparing them for school in the respect of their development, their knowledge that they have, rather than the actual softer development that children go through.
Maybe that's more for us to do on the way that we share that best practice and get people to talk about what it is that they do for a living, so that they don't. I find it really disheartening when I talk to people who work in early years, when I say, so what do you do? And they go, I just work in a nursery, or I just work in childcare. And it's my least favourite word, like, for anyone. I don't think anyone just does anything. I think that there's huge amounts of skill in all the jobs. I think we're seeing that a little bit with supermarket workers at the minute, that idea that not only are they going out and putting themselves at risk every day, but that there are now lots of applications for supermarket jobs, and actually supermarket workers have quite a high skill set in terms of their ability to manage queues and people and logistics and to do that sort of stuff, but in the same way as childcare workers and people working in early years and in education in general, they've got to bring their whole selves to work every day. They can't come and pretend, you can't take it out on the people that you're working with, and you have to still be able to process all the things and keep going, and you can't just stop and go and have 10 minutes and make a cuppa and give yourself a shake. You have to be on it all the time, and I think well-being's another thing that we're seeing change a little bit within early years and care, and the focus on like sort of, you can't pour from an empty cup and you have to put your own like oxygen mask on first, almost, is becoming a little bit more prevalent. Do you think that the sort of burnout and the pushing yourself to extremes that does happen within care and early years, do you think that that's linked to that sort of, it's just what I do?
Yeah, I do. I think it's that they think they just have to trudge through every day and ignore any of their feelings or ignore how they feel. It's also as well about skillful management, and the care sector, early years and both health and social care, is very different in that your manager has normally been a practitioner, because that's the way they have to, the skill set, the qualifications that they have to have. So you quite often get managers that are in that position that want to be managers, but have still got a very focus on early years, and their management skills aren't probably as sharp as they needed to be. Whereas in other sectors, you're trained to be the manager and you can go and manage, you can go and manage, like say, a supermarket, or you could go and manage in an office. It doesn't matter, your management skills are the same. So I think that the management training within companies is so important. And I think they don't know what to do with the health and well-being of the staff, because their priority is making sure the children are safe, cared for, and they meet all the regulatory requirements. And that's how they've been trained, that's where their background has come from. So there is a big piece about making sure that if you do go into management, that you understand what that management role looks like.
Yeah, I think that's actually really important. I spoke to Lucy Lewin a couple of weeks ago, who runs an organisation called the Profitable Nursery Academy, and it's that idea that she came there because she became a manager through that very route way, and actually the business side of it was the stuff that was really difficult, like keeping on top of like pay and income versus outgoings and that sort of, because that's not how you become a nursery manager necessarily, by being able to balance books and talk about cost versus expenditure and stuff. So she did loads of professional development and got really, really good at that bit, and now supports other nursery managers doing that same thing. Like, what can managers do to make sure that they have that focus on staff needs and being able to recognise those things? Like, if there are like nursery managers or managers in care listening to this, and I think actually that's me, like I'm all about the kids and their development, and I might have been maybe slightly neglectful of, or I can see that my staff, like, morale might be low, that people are struggling because of the situation, and I don't know how to help them. How do they figure that out? What support is there for managers to develop those skills?
First of all, you need a strong team that are in your room, in the room with the children. So you will need your level 3s or your senior room managers or your room managers, depending on the setup, to really understand what that quality childcare looks like. So not everything has to go to the manager, and they need confidence then to know that it's being dealt with, that it's working fantastically, everything is as it should be in the rooms, and it just gives them that time then to be able to focus on the other things. And more structured wellbeing meetings. So there is a time where you can talk about, with your manager, how you're feeling, what are you struggling with, what support that you need, but also your progression. We can't just look at it from a negative point of view. Those conversations as well need to be positive, and like, what can we do to support you to progress, or give you the skills to be able to manage these situations more confidently, and not have the manager running around and being relied upon across the whole setting, because that's where you start to see the cracks, and that's where things can potentially slip through the net, because the manager can't be everything to everybody. And then that will give them some time to be able to focus on the overall, really looking at the setting from an overall perspective.
There's loads of stuff that you've said today that makes ridiculous amounts of sense, and that we could probably have our podcast on any of those topics, sort of as individual ones, because I think there's lots of it that I could talk about all day. Can you tell us where people can find you if they wanted to maybe find out more about how they can do some development? How can they find you and your service and what they do to be able to get in touch?
Yeah, so we've got a website. It's Avail Learning Academy, that focuses on the early years and health and social care e-learning. So you find us at www.avail-learning-academy.com.
I'll put a link down in the description box if people want to have a look for it. Is there anything else that you would want to tell people that you haven't had the opportunity to say so far?
Keep learning, keep moving forward. I know it's tough. I know the sector is tough. It's very demanding. But sometimes just take that time, that 5 minutes with a coffee, to sit back and reflect how far you've come and where you want to go and how you can get there, because sometimes time just takes over and you end up sticking with what you're doing, but the opportunities are far and wide, and just take 5 minutes.
That, I think, is good advice for all of us at the minute, to take 5 minutes and to have a good think about where we want to go. Thank you so much for your time this morning. It's been really, really lovely talking to you. And thanks to you at home Don't forget, for more great content tailored towards those working in care, health and education, it's free to join our network and you gain access to some great articles, videos and resources to support your career, and some information about career development, as well as our members' discount and benefits scheme. And if you'd like to feature on a future episode of Podcash, please get in touch at alumni@cash.org.uk. Until next time, take care.